Welcome to Ignite Your Confidence for women in leadership who want to speak up and stand out. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Here you'll get all of the tips and tools that you need to stand out with unshakable confidence. Let's jump into today's episode. Let's talk about eye contact. I want to isolate this today because it is such a critical communication skill. And we'll talk about that being on Zoom or any virtual platform, as well as in person. Eye contact is critical for connection. This is important to think about where this came from, because it's amazing how this affects every person and even mammal when you think about it. So let's think about, imagine yourself being at a networking event or a party, and you're in conversation with somebody and you're talking, and they keep looking over their shoulder. And it can feel disjointing. And you're probably thinking, well, why aren't they listening to me? Why are they looking over their shoulder? It's almost as if they are waiting for somebody that they really wanted to talk to at the party. Or perhaps you're with your partner or a friend and you're talking about something, and suddenly the cell phone goes off, or it doesn't even go off, but they're looking at their cell phone. It's the same thing. It is that barrier to connection, and it breaks the connection. So it makes it feel like they're not listening to you. So I want to share some of these best practices and things that we can do to help ourselves and also to help others make sure that we feel listened to. Because as any of you have been following me for a while, you know that a huge part of what I talk about is how we come across. It's that whole intention versus impact. Well, I wasn't intending to make you feel like I wasn't listening to you when I looked across your shoulder, waiting for that other person. That wasn't what I was doing, but that's how it comes across. And this is where communication can be so misconstrued, because we don't understand these things. So I have lots of tips around this one, and I keep thinking about them all, but I'm going to do my best to go in some type of order, especially for those of you linear folks who want to make sure that you have things in an orderly fashion. So let's think about where eye contact originates. You are born. Right out of the womb, what happens? The mom holds the baby most of the time, or there's a caregiver that holds the baby. But what happens? It's eye to eye. It's an immediate eye to eye connection. That is how we are wired. We are wired for connection as human beings. And if you think about it, now let's fast forward to you're at a meeting in the hallway, or you're having a coffee with somebody, whether it's a networking event or you're at a cafe with somebody and you're talking to them. On average, you're going to look at each other for 7 to 9 seconds before one of you looks away. That statistically is what happens. It's unconscious. We don't think about it. But when you translate that to a group environment where you're leading a meeting, for example, or you're speaking up at some type of, whether it's a meeting, a presentation, or an event, then what you want to do for the optimal level of connection, you want to look at each individual for 3 to 5 seconds at a time. This is challenging for most of us. And if you think about it, to give you some context for this, on average, most people, when they are presenting or they're talking to a group of people, they either scan the group, and then it looks like they're just scanning the group and their eyes are going all over the place with the eye dart, where the eyes are flitting around, or they might be a pattern where it's like the old typewriters where you look to the right, you look to the left, you look to the right, you look to the left, or there's also the triangle pattern. Any pattern that makes it look like you are staged takes away from connection. Now, it is challenging. The other thing I wanted to say is that on average, to give some further context to this, so I mentioned to you that in one-on-one, without thinking about it, it's 7 to 9 seconds. So then intentionally, when you're speaking to a group, looking at people individually for 3 to 5 seconds, and then average, most people are looking at others in their audience for about 1 second, if we're lucky. Generally speaking, we look up to think, we look down to think, we look to the side. and we don't have our eyes solidly in place for more than 1 or 2 seconds generally. And so I'm suggesting that you have that eye contact that's solid. Now, it can be nerve-wracking to have a group of people that you're presenting to or you're speaking to. And it is more comfortable generally for us to scan the room. It feels like we're covering all of our bases. We're looking at everybody. But what that does, as far as the impact, it comes across as if either you're nervous, you're untrustworthy, or you don't know what you're talking about. We have to make sure that when we are in these situations that we are connecting individual to individual. So think about it this way. Instead of, I have to connect with all these people at once and it's overwhelming, think one individual at a time. And there are going to be times for those of you that do larger speaking situations where you might not be able to possibly look at every single person in the audience. If you've got maybe even 50 to 100 people plus, then what you want to do is look in different directions for a few seconds at a time. You don't want to bob your head all over the place, but then you need to simulate it as if you are looking. So looking a little bit down closer, that people might be closer to you on the stage, or looking maybe in the middle of the place, then into the back. But again, the goal is to have a random pattern. I know it's a lot to think about, but that is the ideal scenario. Now, if we're talking about, let's say, a situation where you're in an in-person setting and somebody keeps looking at their phone, or they keep looking away, even on a virtual meeting, and they keep looking away, and you're thinking, where are they looking? They don't seem like they're present. And what you can do, first of all, there's a few different things. Obviously, we can't control other people, but you can set a boundary. It all depends on the relationship that you have. And the key thing, of course, is to use your best judgment. But what you could do, let's say you have a good relationship with the person, you could flat out say, hey, it looks like you're pretty busy. Is there a better time for us to talk? And that in of itself might wake them up and go, oh my gosh, you're right. I was on my phone. I'm so sorry. They might not even realize it. And it might sound silly to think, wow, they really might not realize they're on their phone. But yes, a lot of us are in that place where we're so conditioned to look at our phone, we don't even think about it anymore. One thing, so that's one thing that I'd recommend. On the other side, if you are waiting for an important call or a text and you need to still have the meeting, just tell people in advance. This is where communication is critical. Say, hey, the reason I have my phone on the table is because I am waiting for an important text or call. So I wanted you to have a heads up that I might need to take that. So anything like that, communication wise, definitely helps to diffuse any situations and being proactive about it. It's so helpful. If people understand the why, if they know the reason, they're going to be a lot more full of grace for you. They're a lot more forgiving, or more importantly, they won't be resentful or frustrated, because truthfully, it really is about the audience and what matters to them. So thinking about this from the other side of the coin, now let's think about the other side being, if you're on a Zoom call and you're speaking, you want to make sure that you are looking at that webcam. It's so tempting to look down at where your face is, perhaps, or over to the side where your face is, or probably more naturally, you're not looking at yourself as much, perhaps, anymore, but you're looking at the person speaking. And if they are down on the right-hand bottom corner of your screen, that's where your eyes are going to go if you're looking at them speaking. But then it doesn't look like you are actually looking at them. This is, to this day, it is the most challenging communication situation that I still face, because what are you looking at when you're looking at the webcam? A green dot, or a black line that is dividing the people in the gallery view. Whatever it is generally not the person speaking that is right in your line of sight. So it takes a lot of intention to do this. Now, I have also found that the sweet spot for some monitors is not right at the camera. I use a MacBook Air. For me, it's about a half an inch to an inch below the camera. And you can test this out with people. Test it out with people you know and you trust and that you have good relationships with, and say, hey, I'm right now, I am looking at the middle of my screen. Does it look like I'm looking at you, or does it look like I'm looking somewhere else? So these tests to help ourselves can be such a massive and important thing for us to go, where is the best place for me to look, so that the listener, it appears to them like I'm looking at them. Because if we don't appeal to the listener and we're focused on ourselves, because let's face it, I'm going to be more comfortable, and any of us are going to be more comfortable when we're looking at the person, because we want to see their facial expressions. We want to see their eye contact. But the catch is that we've got to make sure that we are modeling looking at the camera so they feel included, they feel part of the conversation. And the other thing I want to say about this is, remember the whole 80-20 rule, that while all of these tips are ideal, and they're certainly tips I recommend, at the same time, think about focusing on doing them 80% of the time. It's okay if occasionally you look down because you want to look at their expression. We've got to do that because occasionally we do need to look. But you want to think about the majority of the time you're focused on the camera. And when you're in person, same thing. You don't want to have a stare down contest. If it's longer than 10 seconds, when you're in person looking at somebody where you're speaking to them individually, it's going to feel weird for them. It's suddenly going to feel like a stare down contest, and you don't want that in your relationships. So those are a few tips that I would offer related to eye contact. A couple of other thoughts on this. First of all, let's say you are in a room where you can't actually see the audience. Similar to what I said before, related to when you've got a large group of people, it's the same idea where you need to simulate that eye contact. And the key is that you're not bobbing your head all over the place. So it looks like, you don't want it to look like you're darting around the room. Because again, we've got to make sure that we look confident and credible, and that we're able to connect. So I feel like there was something else, but I can't remember. So I'm going to go past that one. But think about it this way. Let's review a few things. In person, on average, we look at people when we're chatting in the hallway, 7 to 9 seconds. We don't even think about it. Anything longer than that, it would be a little bit creepy and now, or just awkward. And you don't want people to start suddenly now thinking about your eye contact. And then the other thing, when you're presenting in a meeting, looking at each person 3 to 5 seconds at a time. At most, make sure that you're connecting individually. Beware of scanning the audience or having a pattern that makes it look like you're a robot. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you are connecting like a regular human being. People are going to respond to a conversational person that has natural eye contact much more than someone that comes across as if they're just too much with their eyes. The other thing here's a new tip that I was just thinking about. A lot of times you might have somebody in your life that actually has really intense eye contact and it feels like there's no break. So then you feel like you can't look away either. With people like that, or even so, to come prepared, make sure that you have a pen, a pad of paper, and a glass of water or something to drink, because that is a great and very natural way to break eye contact if the person is staring or it feels like they're looking at you for too long. And that's a way to make it easier for you and them as well. But let's face it, we've all got to have a strategy in place for what we're doing here. So remember that eye contact is critical. It is how we're wired as the power related to connection. And when we are looking at people in the eyes, it comes across as if we are present. And I certainly hope that you do that so that you also come across as present. And in fact, I was thinking about this. Sometimes people will talk about this with their partners. And for me, I have a partner who happens to be 10. No, he's 11 years younger than me. Not that that really matters anymore, but it is pretty funny. He's really into video games. He loves his movies And so to, to see him, I remember once being on a plane with him and he was watching a movie, playing a video game, and doing something else on his iPad. And I'm thinking, how could you possibly do all this? Oh, plus listening to me. And the amazing thing was that he's actually able to do it. But here's the thing that I want to say for any of you out there that are similar to having close friendships or partners like I have, that we've got to educate them too. That, hey, even though I know you can do all of that, I don't feel heard when you're doing all those other things and you're not looking at me. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind in your communication and your relationships, so that you're very much on the same page of what works for each of you, and then figure out a compromise or simply figure out how you can work together to make sure that you are having the best relationship possible, whether it's at work or whether it's at home. Communicate, communicate, communicate. All right, folks, have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy the tips. And that's a wrap of another episode of Ignite Your Confidence. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. If you're interested in more tips and tools around confidence, please join me over in my Facebook group called Ignite Your Confidence with Karen Laus. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.